Hi, this is Miss Lisa from Talcott Free Library, reading Chapter 32, Al. The problem with my beautiful moment with our visitor was that I wanted the one after it to be beautiful, too. I wanted another person, a person with questions, to knock on the door. But the child with the notebook was only in the house for 20 minutes, and there was no one else. After he left, I sat down at the big wooden table with the box marked Martinville Library Fire. He had carefully repacked the things inside, which I appreciated as I laid them out in front of me. There were a few news articles from the Grantville paper and even a short paragraph from the City News. Martinville is too small to have its own newspaper. But the obituaries of Ms. Scoggin and Mr. Brock, they had both led notable lives, unlike myself. I remembered the funerals, where the three of us ghosts had stood together in the sunlight watching. I was particularly watching out our dear boy, of course. Though we'd watched him grow quite tall by the time he was a teenager, his cheeks had never fully lost their roundness. He still blushed whenever he spoke, which is a sure sign of depth and sincerity. And at Ms. Scoggin's funeral, he spoke. He talked about what the library meant to him. I know it sounds unlikely, but it seemed as if he was looking at us the whole time he spoke. I felt just as invisible as Ms. Scoggin and Mr. Brock were that day, but I may have been fooling myself. My mind struggled with the same old knot. Number one, it was impossible that our dear boy had started the fire. He would never do such a thing, even if he was upset. Never. Number two, it was impossible that anyone else had started the fire. The warden said that a match had been struck in the library basement and held to a book. No one but the dear boy had been there. I remembered the dear boy that fateful evening, his head down and his ears bright red, hurrying down the basement stairs after Ms. Scoggin let him have it. Criticisms galore. He hadn't changed the paper towel rolls in the bathrooms. He needed to remember to stand up straight and look people in the eyes. And worst of all, he'd misshelved some biographies in the fiction section. A misfiled book was as good as lost. Didn't he know that by now? By the time he got away from her, he was practically running. I had not let myself think of that day for a long time. I gathered up the clippings, put them back in their box, and walked it over to the large cabinet marked Town History. Hardly anyone ever comes to look at such things. Lost in my cloud, I crossed the parlor to gather Ms. Scoggin's teacup. She was in her chair, her cup within reach, but still full to the brim, and by now surely cold. Mr. Brock had come downstairs and was in his spot on the sofa. Or he was hovering above it anyway. I stared. They were both hovering now. Why? Mr. Brock gripped his book with both hands. I realized I had never given him his cheese. It wasn't like him not to notice the absence of cheese. You didn't drink your tea, I said to Ms. Scoggin. Should I brew another pot? She shook her head. I shouldn't have yelled at him, she said. He was a good boy. She covered her librarian pin with one hand. I didn't say anything. I knew she wasn't talking about the child who had just left our house. We both knew exactly who she was talking about, the dear boy. But what could either of us do about it now? I will always remember the day Ms. Scoggin presented him with his official staff pin. His eyes blazed with a pride I remembered from my own first day at the library. From that moment, he never came to work without it. We all wore our pins. Ms. Scoggins said librarian. Mine said Al for assistant librarian, which Ms. Scoggins said was too many letters to fit. And Edwards said intern. Edward, that was his name, our dear boy. He liked to call me Al. Chapter 33, Evan. Dad! Evan wasn't even in the house yet. He was shouting from the driveway, Dad! His father's worried face appeared on the other side of the cellar window, near Evan's feet. Dad! Evan talked at the window. I know about the library. I know what everybody thinks, that you... He couldn't make himself say it. His dad's face went away. 10 seconds later, his father banged out through the screen door with hard eyes and blotchy cheeks. Who told you that? No one told me, Evan said. I figured it out myself. He held up How to Write a Mystery Novel. Everyone thinks you set that fire, don't they? But I know what to do. I think I know who did it. Slow down, his dad said. Start at the beginning. Why won't you talk to me? Evan started to cry, which he had not expected. His dad's face changed. His shoulders relaxed, and he said, I guess I haven't known how to talk about this with you. Let's go sit on the rock. He reached out, took Evan's hand, and led the way around back to the big rock Evan's grandmother had named the Rock of Truth when his dad was little. It was still warm from the sun. Upsetting you is the last thing I wanted, Evan, his dad started. I didn't set the library fire, but I'm sure plenty of people still think I did. I was there that night, and I was questioned by the police several times. It's not something I like to think about. I guess I hoped you would never hear about it. That was unrealistic. He smiled a little. I should have been the one to tell you about all this. I'm sorry I didn't. Evan waited. The first rule of the Rock of Truth was no lying. The second rule was no interrupting. But his dad seemed to be out of words. Evan said, The paper said the fire started in the basement. A match had been struck and held to a book. Evan's father shook his head. That's something I would never do. Never. But I was the only person there. Are you totally sure, though, that you were the only person there? His dad nodded. But I didn't light any match. I was questioned, like I said. Word got around. He stopped. The article said there was an intern. Evan pointed at his father. You were the intern? Yes. After my mom died, going to the library helped me. I felt safe there, like nothing bad could get me. When I was 14, the head librarian asked me if I'd like an after-school job as a helper. I couldn't believe it. Getting paid to be at the library? I told her yes. Her name was Mildred Scoggin, and she was a great lady. She was also a strict lady, and she was usually yelling at one of us. At me, I mean, or at the assistant librarian. Anyway, one afternoon she told me off about something or other and then sent me down to the basement to deal with the book returns. The book return chute sent the books down there to a bin. I would replace the circulation cards, stack the books on a cart, and reshelve them. I'm sure I felt like an idiot for getting yelled at in front of everyone, but like I said, she was the boss, and she did a lot of that. But the police made a big deal about it later. They kept asking if I was angry, and I kept telling them, no, she was always like that. Al, the assistant librarian, called them Ms. Scoggins' criticism and reminders. We had kind of a joke about it. So going down to the basement to do the book returns, it really felt like any other day. But it wasn't any other day, Evan said. No, it was the day the library burned down. Did she die, Ms. Scoggin? His father hesitated only for a moment. Yes, Mildred Scoggin died of smoke inhalation. You go out, though. His dad nodded. Al saved me. She dragged me outside through the basement door. But I know a lot of people around her here still think I started the fire. Evan was swept by a rush of anger. How could you let them think it? His father looked sad. I didn't let them think it. I always said I didn't do it. But how could I prove what didn't happen without knowing what did happen? I still have no idea. I believe you, Dad. I know you didn't set that fire. You didn't. Evan's eyes filled with tears of frustration, possibly the worst kind of tears. His father opened his arms and Evan leaned into them. They sat like that for a while Evan's mind rushed around. It was H.G. Higgins, he thought. He was there that day. The book, the Polaroid picture, the keys, the treehouse, everything led to H.G. Higgins. Dad, I have a suspect. His father drew back. A what? Someone who was at the library that day. I have his book, and I found his keys, and I know he used to live around here somewhere. It's H.G. Higgins, Dad. He's a famous writer, but his whole life is a secret. Evan, we should tell the police or the fire warden. It's not too late, is it? And then everyone will know they were wrong about you. This is a big deal, Dad. People died. Back up, kiddo. You're saying that you think the writer H.G. Higgins started the library fire? Yes. Why in the world do you believe that? He returned a book that day. I have the book. He was there. Okay, let's say that's true. And 50 other people probably returned books that day too. But his book had a picture in it, a picture someone took from the treehouse in the woods. His dad looked at him. Can I see it? Evan unzipped his bag and yanked it from the book. That's probably him in the picture, and his keys were at the old library ground. One of them opened the padlock on the treehouse. His father held up the Polaroid. This isn't H.G. Higgins. This is a terrible picture of your teacher, Mr. O'Neill. Of his eye, anyway. I took it myself when we were teenagers with his camera. What? Everything you're saying suggests that H.G. Higgins lived around here once. Maybe he took out that book. Maybe he climbed up to the treehouse, which, by the way, you are not allowed to do. But what makes you think he would set fire to the library? Evan didn't actually know. He just didn't want the bad guy to be anyone from Martinville. He wanted it to be someone not from here. I don't know the motive yet, he admitted, but I'll figure it out. First, we have to find him. And that's when his father reached into his back pocket and withdrew a small envelope folded in half. Evan caught sight of the writing and knew exactly what his dad was holding. It was the letter he had written to H.G. Higgins. Evan, his dad said, I'm H.G. Higgins.